Welcome back to another Q&A. It is August 3rd, 2020. So this week was another open Q&A. I haven't really been doing many of the topic ones lately. Maybe throw one in occasionally, but the variety in the questions has been really good, so we'll keep doing these for now. All right, so let's see. Preference for electrolyte supplement to assist in cellular hydration. As far as electrolytes go, I mean, you can get a lot of it through food. You know, if you're adding in, the sodium part gets a little bit more difficult just because a lot of the foods that we're eating traditionally aren't very high in sodium. So, you know, obviously that's really easy to add into the diet. A lot of the time I'll use some type of iodized salt, so the people are actually getting some iodine content in the diet. If we need to add additional iodine for whatever reason, whether it be like some kind of thyroid issue, then we can do that through supplements usually, or food. But potassium, I mean, you can get, for the most part, I mean, you can get potassium through food. You can track it on, you know, most of the tracking apps. If you need to add additional, you could either, you know, add it through food, or you could add it through, so just real simple. You could just do potassium chloride, be pretty simple to do. In bulk, it's very cheap, or like a salt substitute, which would be, you know, no salt or low salt, or, you know, whatever name brand or generic brand you have around you. So obviously there are other electrolytes as well. If you're worried about getting sufficient like chloride in your diet, for example, you can add it through supplementation. If you're sweating excessively, and then I would recommend potentially looking at additional electrolyte supplementation, especially around training. So shameless plug for Morphogen. Hopefully have one coming out. We'll see. I don't control those things. It's been mentioned. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But beyond that, you could use something like coconut water that has some additional electrolytes. And there are electrolyte supplements floating around out there. Nothing that's like overly extravagant, but you can get most of your electrolytes through food. Okay, do you have experience? This question got cut off, hold on. Do you have any experience, or is it worth using Cissus quadrangularis? I think I say that right, maybe, as a bodybuilder, or just stick to curcumin? So actually I use it every day. So I use Orthogen, another Morphogen product that does contain it. I believe it's 1,000 milligrams, 20% extract. The ketosterones are what you're looking for in the extract. So yeah, I do use it all the time, and I had used it in the past, and independently. It came out years ago, and it was kind of a hot thing for a while. It's still a good supplement. It does have research behind it. It does have some positive benefits. There's actually, if you want to pull up some studies, you probably just jump on examine.com and you can see where the research is compiled. I'm pretty sure it's on there. But yeah, I don't see why you couldn't just use both. I mean, I use both. They're not necessarily the same thing. They don't necessarily do the same thing. Now, Cissus also has some effects on serotonin too, so, you know, watch for that if you're using it. But beyond that, yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't just use both, and I would typically recommend that if you're, you know, looking for joint relief or pain relief. Okay. Volume question. Transitioning to Off season and love being in the gym. Find it hard taking rest days. If I want to keep 5-day per week split, would you just add more calories to be productive as possible, or perhaps look at the split? So push-pull leg split, 5 days per week. I assume they're probably like, rotating through the split continuously. Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by be as productive as possible. If you mean, if you mean progressing in terms of poundages and actually, or progressing, adding more volume, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. I mean, you can always, well, not always, but you can usually offset caloric expenditure by eating more, right? If you're worried about not being a surplus, then yeah, I mean, you can just eat more calories. But what I'm more worried about with training wise is recovery, and you can't just out eat, a huge recovery demand. Yeah, you can eat more to recover actual muscle tissue. I'm worried more about the nervous system, right? I'm worried more about overall CNS and autonomic nervous system balance. If you're eating thousands of calories and you're eating sufficient protein, I mean, muscularly, you're gonna recover usually, unless you're training things so frequently that you're overlapping and you're going into workouts constantly sore. Like you train in pecs one day and you train pecs 2 days later and they're just sore and they never recover. But I would be more looking at the nervous system side of things. Are you feeling ready to train? Are you actually progressing in the gym? Are you adding weight to the bar continuously? Are you amped up during the workouts? What these kinds of cues are the things that I'm really looking at during training. Camera fell off the mount. We will continue. All right. Those are the things that I'm going to be looking at more so than the calorie surplus, because we can just manipulate that through the actual intake, right? So how do you recover? How are you progressing in terms of poundages? How do you feel? How is your sleep? How is your stress? All of these things are accumulating, and those are the things I'm going to be looking at. So find it hard to take rest days. Well, that's something that I talk about with clients a lot, is they stress themselves out just on these rest days because they're just constantly worrying that they're not doing anything. Yes, everyone needs different programming, potentially different amount of rest. They have different overall capacity for recovery in terms of total allostatic load. How much stress can their body handle from training, environment, relationships, emotional, so on and so forth. But you cannot, you don't want to put yourself in this cycle of like anxiety that I'm, oh my goodness, I'm taking a rest day, I'm so bored, I'm just thinking all the time, I can't find something to do. Get a freaking another part-time job at home where you do some, like, sell shit on eBay or something. I don't know. I mean, there's so many little things you can do, or just rest, or find hobbies, do something besides sit there and just think about training all the time. You're just going to create more stress, and you're just going to create more sympathetic drive where you're just thinking. I love rest days. I don't even think about it anymore. I'm like, holy shit, I am ready to take a rest day. If you're training hard enough, you should be ready and welcoming these rest days. If not, I tend to question whether you're actually training hard enough and whether you're actually even creating enough adaptation to grow and progress over the long term, right? Because the more advanced you get, the closer you're going to be to that line of overreaching to actually continue to make progress and create this adaptation. So, like, welcome the rest days. They're good. They will help. They will help you grow. Okay. Any advice on how to use TB500 and BPC 157? Small shoulder issue, but mainly just thinking of using it before hitting next growth phase. Yeah, see, they could be used both together or separately. Not exactly the same mechanism, though. They do provide some of the same benefits. They don't exactly work the same, though. Now, TB does not need dosed as frequently. A couple times a week tends to be normal recommendation. Could be used a little more. Some people even do once a week. Tend to look for around twice a week. Dosages, you're going to see all kinds of different dosages. A lot of this research is not human research, and they are translating dose from, like a rat study or whatever it might be over to human study. So that's where we're getting our dosages. Now, TB, a couple milligrams at a time, could be a little more, can get very expensive. If you're looking at 2 to 3 milligrams 2 times a week, you're going to go through a lot of it. That's generally where a pretty good effective dose is going to be at, though. BPC, and that can be subcutaneous. Doesn't really make much difference. It's going to work systemically, so it doesn't really matter. The BPC, dose more frequently, 1 to 2 times a day, typically intramuscularly or as close as you can get to the site. It's in the shoulder. It's really easy. Just go in the shoulder somewhere, right? Dosing generally is by, a lot of people are going to recommend it by weight. Micrograms per certain amount of body weight. Now, just for simplicity's sake, you're probably looking at somewhere between 400 to 800 micrograms a day, which is still a lot considering a bottle might be 2 to 5 milligrams total. So you're still going to go through quite a bit. So if you want to go on the side of a little bit less, you could probably do a few hundred micrograms a day and still get some benefit from it. As close as you can to the site. Like I said, if you want to split it up into 2 doses, you can. Doesn't necessarily have to. You'll still get benefit from 1 a day. And yeah, that's the long and short of it, more or less. Refeeds, how do I know when to take one? How much extra carbs should I be eating? How often should I be doing it in a diet if the goal is fat loss? Well, that's a very, very broad question. So I'm not going to be able to give you any really, really specific recommendations. I literally know nothing about you at all. You would need to be working with me, and probably I would need to know a lot more and have been working through fat loss phase to really have any idea what kind of refeeding you're going to need in terms of amounts and frequency. And even then, it might change. For example, I had client updates this morning. I had a few people that I use refeeds with. It wasn't even the same refeed that they did the last time. It wasn't even in the same frequency. It's not even necessarily going to be, do this refeed of 300 grams of carbs or 500 or 800 or whatever it is for this amount of time every 7 days. Their refeeds have changed. Sometimes it can be reoccurring. That does work in a lot of cases, but it's not always going to be reoccurring. Sometimes I just call it as we go, as needed type of thing. So a little bit more about why or when it might be needed, I could potentially give some input on that. The amounts and frequency though, no idea. I know nothing about you. So how do you know when to take them? Well, are you making multiple changes in the diet and not getting much response? If this is happening early on in the diet, you might just need to make more changes because you might need to at least create a large enough of surplus to start seeing some effect. I see this commonly in people that are eating tons of food, and we just have to make multiple changes or a bigger drop at the beginning to even get anything moving. I don't worry about that a whole lot. Now, if we're into the fat loss phase a little bit more, and I'm making changes pretty often, I'm not really seeing anything, it's a little bit different scenario. We might need to implement a refeed because we're seeing some of that negative, or a lot of that negative metabolic adaptation, and we need to offset that. Now, with that said, that may need to become a normal part of the process so that adaptation isn't occurring. We might need to continue to refeed along with having the baseline deficit in order to keep the engine moving, if you will. So that's, I'm just gonna look for adaptation. That's when I need to have somebody refeed. So are we making changes often and nothing's happening? There you go, that's adaptation. That's when a time that refeeding would be implemented. Now, obviously there are other reasons that you could see adaptation. You can see adaptation for a few different reasons. It could be something that's chronically underlying, that's been there for a long period of time that maybe I didn't necessarily know about at the beginning. Females, this is really common. If we have females that have a lot of like underlying hormonal imbalance. Now, obviously, I'm trying to spot all these things at first by asking for lab work and asking questions in the consultation and so on and so forth. But there are times when you can't see everything. You don't always see everything, and some of that stuff pops up. And even when you refeed, it just doesn't work, right? So you can try diet breaks, which are going to be a little bit longer. I consider a diet break anything that's longer than a few days, right? Getting into a week, maybe even 2 weeks in some cases. And they're going to be a little bit more effective in reversing some of those adaptations. Why? Because it's longer. It's a longer time out of a deficit. So yeah, you have to look for adaptation. It's going to pop up in different ways. You're going to see it in different ways. You're going to see metabolic or weight loss resistance in different ways. It's going to happen more the leaner you get, typically. It's going to happen more the further away from you get from your natural set point, typically. It's going to happen more the further your calories get away from your normal maintenance, typically. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at. But beyond that, I couldn't even begin to tell you how much and when, because I don't know anything about you. So, hope that that's at least relatively helpful. But I think that's, let's see, 2. Yes, that's it for this week, guys. I appreciate the questions, and we'll talk to you next time.